What I'm going to tell you is basically kind of the real world, politically incorrect things that you haven't heard until now, because that seems to be my job. I seem to be the designated buzzkill. You know, the guy that comes up here and really kind of tells you that this stuff is harder than it seems. It's going to take you longer than you think it will. You know, but ultimately, it should be worth it. I'm also going to tell you about 5 things that I found in my mentoring practice to avoid when creating your SOA, because I've seen people do it and I've seen some disasters occur. And so I'll give you some real-world perspective there. First thing to remember is that we're living very much in a confusing and changing world, in that service-oriented architecture, at the end of the day, has different definitions depending on who you're talking to. And you have 2 camps that are out there right now. You have the enterprise architecture camp, which has been existing for a long period of time. We've had that concept for the last 15 years. And lots of frameworks that are built around the management practice of enterprise architecture, and the Zachman, Gartner, Open Group, TOGAF, vendors such as IBM, Oracle, BEA, and a lot of people that are rolling their own. And we also have some hype-driven confusion which is going on right now. In fact, one of the difficult things that I find when I get out there and try to teach people about this stuff is to get beyond the hype that's in the space. There's definitely what I call a management by magazine mentality out there. Okay, we like to read articles and we like to understand things in the space. We want to move in that particular direction as quickly as we can, whether we think it's going to enhance our resume or actually is truly going to enhance what's happening within the enterprise today. There doesn't seem to be a lot of leadership in the space around SOA, where usually in the object-oriented space, people were following a few leaders in the emerging C++ development space and component space and distributed object spaces and things like that. Today, it seems to be an area where there are a lot of voices that are shouting, and people are listening to a lot of versions of what the technology is and what the technology can do. And by the way, I'm happy to volunteer to be that leader that everybody listens to. The other things occurring, we're moving in Web 2.0, and a lot of processes are moving outside the firewall. So we have these things like software as a service, like Salesforce.com, guys like StrikeIron, and now Google APIs, and services are being sold by guys like Yahoo, and that's changing the game, so to speak. In other words, we're having a lot of processes that we're outsourcing, and we're learning to leverage those processes, and we're building service-oriented architectures to make that happen. Departments operating ultimately independent of oversight are causing a lot of issues right now. So there's usually an enterprise architect within lots of organizations. That person or a group of people typically has no authority and no power. So they write things that people don't read, and they move things. I'm sorry, that's the truth. I'm saying generally speaking. And what's happening, little fiefdoms in the organization are starting to build SOA and build their own applications. And since they're budgeted at a project level, those are really the first instances of service-oriented architecture that you see occurring in these organizations, and that's how things are occurring. So if you think that there's a strategic initiative in a lot of the Global 2000 companies and government organizations out there around SOA, there typically is, but that's not where the action's occurring. It's occurring down in the project layers, and you'll go down to the project layers, and you go, by the way, have you talked to the guys who are doing the strategy? And they haven't. And you go to the guys who are doing the strategy, and by the way, these guys are building an SOA. Did you know that? No, we didn't. And that's occurring right now. More enterprises' applications are web-delivered. Technology is a business advantage ultimately and a cost-saving mechanism. So we're not able to go out there anymore and say, we want to build this for technology's sake because everybody else is doing it. They want an ROI. They want a business case that's made around the technology. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. So business ultimately is in constant change. And most of people who are working in Global 2000 enterprises today are going to be a very different business in 5 years than they are today. And the problem is that we built architectures that can't change. And typically these are archaeology projects. So you look at these kind of a mess of an architecture, and I'll show you some pictures later on in the presentation. And you go, well, what happened here? And reality is they have tactical project, tactical project, tactical project, tactical project. We did this to solve this particular problem, to get this particular thing out because we wanted to make our quarter so we could get bonuses. And the same story, we did this to get this one tactical project done so we wanted to make our quarter to make bonuses. Well, what's occurred with all these layers of different technologies and all these interconnections that are made, ad hoc typically, you have something that's incredibly static and can't change without breaking a bunch of stuff. And you guys know that's in your organization. I've seen it in your organizations. Whether you're government, Global 2000, it makes no difference. If you have more than 500 people in your company, you're going to have this problem typically. There's very few companies that have been able to avoid it. So the problem is, how do we accommodate for this change? So here we go, service-oriented architecture to the rescue. However, there's not a lot new there. Using services, composition of services, binding things to business processes, putting volatility into a single domain, that's been an architectural pattern for years and years and years. So what we're talking about here is something we've been thinking about for the last 15, 20 years. Certainly I've been writing about it in the AI book and some other things about it. Now is the opportunity. We have the technology, we have the talent, we have the know-how. We can go forward and make this stuff happen. If you're willing to make it occur within your organization, you have the political might, you have the budgetary authority, and you have the ability to push yourself forward. Those are the three ingredients that you need. You need urgency, you need budget, and you need desire. And if you have those things, you can be successful with SOA. If you don't have those things, you're going to run into problems. Okay? You're not going to be successful at this stuff. You start tossing technology at it. We'll talk about that. That probably means I won't get cocktails tonight. So we had the IT challenges for years, and kind of like this is when I was working at Mobile and writing the AI book, this is what we were dealing with. And so we had very stovepipe systems that needed to be bound together, and so we needed some kind of a methodology and layers of technology we could put in place to make that happen. So what we did was we came up with that. So we had some kind of a message broker, message bus, some kind of integration that occurs between the various systems through an orderly, centralized mechanism that accounts for the differences between the source and target systems at a semantic level and a technology level. Seemed to work. And we've had, I was CTO of Mercator and CTO Saga Software, and then we had, Web Methods and all these, and CBeyond and all these other guys in the space, typically that are gone now through acquisition. But this was nirvana to basically solve the integration problem. This was an architectural pattern called Enterprise Application Integration in essence, which is a sub-pattern of SOA. What we got was that. So when I went back to the same companies I had researched when I did the AI book, when I was doing the web services in the SOA book, and I looked at them, what happened? They said, well, your stuff is running great. But unfortunately, we're trying to figure out how to integrate your stuff with all this other stuff that's already, layered upon layer upon layer. And what had happened was, as tactical problems started to emerge, we started layering in technology. We got a problem of CRM. Let's use Salesforce. Let's go get SAP. Okay, we always want to let's build a new application. We put all this stuff on, top of stuff, top of stuff, top of stuff. We get to a point where we have such a dysfunctional, complex architecture, we can't make changes. So what's occurred is that the C-level folks in the organization actually take a very, what's a nice way to put it? They don't like you guys too much, okay? Because you want to change something, you go, listen, look, we want to add a business process, add a particular product, we want to buy a company. You're like, oh, no. It's going to take a year to change all that stuff. In fact, you show them the diagram. See this? This is what we're dealing with. So you got to change this. All this other stuff has to change. And if you add it all up, it's a year and a half to make that happen. So we're limiting IT.